What if I told you that one of the best pilots of all time, Lewis Hamilton, has just played background in Formula One? How is it possible that a 7-times champion has not been able to classify even Q2 2 days in a row, while his partner surpasses it with forcefulness? Today we reveal the data that nobody wants to face: Hamilton's total collapse in Ferrari after the Belgian GP. What happened with Lewis Hamilton at the 2025 Belgian Grand Prix was not a simple stumbling. It was a systemic collapse, crudely revealed by the cold and implacable data offered by the telemetry of a competition weekend. And although Hamilton's public image is still sustained in his legacy, the current reality is that this pedestal wobbles. This was not just a bad Saturday or a complicated Sunday. It was a technical, strategic, and emotional humiliation condensed in 72 hours of competition. He did not classify the Q2 or the sprint qualifying or in the main classification. 18th and 16th. 2 consecutive results that did not appear even in the most pessimistic simulations of Maranello. And all this in Spa-Francorchamps, a circuit that historically had been one of its strengths. A race that started from the pit lane, product of a last-minute modification in the configuration of its SF-25, only added more doubts than answers. Yes, he climbed to the 7th final position, but that result was more product of the errors and problems of the abandonment of rivals, strategic errors of other teams than of a recovery with true career rhythm. The essential thing is that the car did not respond, and worse, the pilot either. The return data revealed a constant worrying. Hamilton lost between 0.8 and a second for return to his partner Charles Leclerc, even in sectors where both carried identical aerodynamic configurations. In terms of tip speed, Hamilton's SF-25 was systematically between 0.2 and 0.3 seconds slower than Leclerc. In Formula One, where every thousandth, these differences are not only serious, they are a declaration of inefficiency. The problem is not only technical, it is trustworthy, adaptation and synergy broken between man and machine. And that lack of connection became explicit during the sprint qualifying, when Hamilton suffered a rear block in a braking, something completely atypical in his history. In his own words, "I had never felt something like that before." Scuderia Ferrari analyzed the incident in real time and ruled out any mechanical failure. The verdict was clear and forceful: pilot error. An error that reveals tension, excess corrections, the desperate attempt to control a car that seems to have your own will in your hands. This fall is not sudden or isolated. Hamilton drags great prizes without getting to the podium. 13 consecutive weekends where he has been unable to enter among the 3 best. Neither in rain nor dry, with soft, medium or hard tires. Such a statistic for any half-grill pilot could go unnoticed. But not for a 7-times world champion, whose only presence on the grill implies expectations of greatness. And this is where the clash is generated, between the legend of what it was and the reality of what it is. Most loyal fans can talk about adaptation, learning curve, necessary time. But this is not a rookie pilot. It is not someone who is understanding for the first time what it means to pilot in Formula One. It is Lewis Hamilton. And when the performance collapse is so pronounced and sustained, you can no longer talk about adjustment time. You must talk about crisis. That if we expand our eyes to other indicators, we will see that the SF-25 is not an intrinsically defective car. Leclerc has managed to stay competitive, regularly classifying in the top 5 and showing that, with proper management, the car can perform. That is, the car has potential, but only one of its pilots is getting it out. And that is not Hamilton. This context suggests that collapse is not just a matter of sensations or lack of rhythm. It is structural. There is a disconnection between the driving style that Hamilton has perfected for 2 decades and the specific demands of this chassis, this power unit, this aerodynamic philosophy. While Leclerc seems to have understood the subtleties of the car from the preseason, Hamilton still seems to be fighting a battle with each curve. If the first act showed Hamilton's technical fall, this second act reveals something even more alarming: the invisible but deeply corrosive deterioration of its relationships within the Ferrari team. Internal fractures are not visible from the gallery or from television, but their effects are felt in each late decision, in each message of cryptic radio, and in each undertaken strategic error. Formula One is, above all, a sport of millimeter synchrony. When that connection between pilot, engineer, and technical team is broken, the results fall apart, regardless of how talented the driver is or how fast the car is. And that is exactly what is happening between Lewis Hamilton and the Scuderia. Radio communications during the Belgian GP are a case study in operational dysfunction. The tone, frequency, and content of the messages reveal a team that no longer works as a single organism. In one of the most commented broadcasts of the weekend, Hamilton asked his engineer Riccardo Adami if he was upset with him. That question, in the midst of a critical classification, was answered with absolute silence. That silence was much louder than any answer. It was not a technical problem or a casual omission. It was a sign of a deeply worn professional relationship. In Formula One, where each decision depends on a fluid and instant communication, that kind of tension is directly proportional to a competitive sinking. The situation is even more complicated when the context of the internal engineering of the team is analyzed. Ferrari made a drastic decision by changing the Hamilton performance engineer in the middle of the season. This is a measure that is rarely implemented without reasons of force majeure. Changing the direct link between pilot and car, the engineer who translates sensations into data and technical adjustments, is like transplanting the heart of a marathon runner in the middle of a race. The consequences are immediate: uncoordination, interpretation errors, lack of confidence in the data, and a total loss of accumulated technical references. Hamilton publicly recognized that the change was necessary but problematic. He said that he and his new engineer were in deep water, trying to understand at the same time the new car updates and the optimal configuration for each path. That is, the pilot and his team are learning about the car at the same rate as the rest of the grid competes by podiums, and that, in Formula One, is lethal. This internal disorganization also coincides with the growing perception that Ferrari has returned to his old habit of generating structural instability when things do not work. Historically, Scuderia has oscillated between long-term projects and short-term emotional reactions. And in the midst of this storm is Hamilton, a pilot accustomed to Mercedes stability, now surrounded by uncertainty, unexpected tactical changes, and engineering decisions that seem improvised rather than strategic. The contrast with Charles Leclerc also adds an extra layer of psychological pressure. While Hamilton struggles to understand the complexities of the SF-25, Leclerc, with years of experience in the Italian house, remains the internal reference. It has the confidence of the team, the structure built around it, and the detailed understanding of how to adapt to the demands of a car that, although imperfect, responds to its driving style. Instead, Hamilton looks like an intruder trying to tune in a frequency that simply does not belong yet. But perhaps the most worrying is the emotional impact that this situation is generating in Hamilton. In the history of Formula One, many great champions have gone through dark stages, moments in which their talent seemed not enough to counteract an environment that did not work in their favor. The question is, can Lewis Hamilton write your own redemption chapter within that narrative? Because what happened in Belgium has been the lowest point of its season, but not necessarily the end point. The reality is that Hamilton is in a fragile position, both within the team and in the general narrative of the season. It is no longer the undisputed number one. He is no longer the man to beat. It is in the midst of a team that, historically, has failed to sustain long-term projects when things are complicated. And in that context, a pilot like Hamilton needs more than talent. It needs stability, support, and an environment that allows him to execute his experience without internal obstacles. What we have seen to the Belgian GP is not only a competitive decline. It is a real-time transformation of a champion that always seemed invincible and that today is vulnerable. And that vulnerability has immense narrative power. Because deep down, Formula One has always been a mirror of the human character taken to the extreme. It is not just speed and aerodynamics, but of emotional management, mental adaptation, and how a pilot responds when he no longer has the best car, nor the most stable team, nor the ideal conditions. And in that context, every decision of Hamilton, every return that completes, every interview that gives, becomes a piece of the puzzle that defines its future. But here is the most important thing: the script is not closed. The narrative can still turn. If Hamilton manages to reconnect with himself and with the team, if he turns frustration into motivation and criticism of impulse, there is no reason to rule out a spectacular return in the second half of the year. After all, we talked about a pilot who has won championships after tracing impossible points, who has silenced doubts over and over since he reached Formula One. If someone can reverse such a situation, it is him. But that does not exempt him from accountability with the track. There is no space for nostalgia or for past glories. Each curve is a new judgment. And that is why, if you are a fan of Formula One, this moment deserves all your attention. Not because of the trophies that Hamilton already has, but for what is at stake now. Because we are witnessing one of the most human and complex narratives of recent years. That of a champion facing his last great battle. Not against other pilots. Against the possibility that your time has already passed. Is this season the beginning of a silent goodbye or the most unexpected rebirth of the paddock? Can Ferrari become the ground where Hamilton writes its final chapter? Or will it simply be a stage that everyone will want to forget? And now it's your turn. Do you think Hamilton can turn this situation before the summer stop? Or are we seeing, career after career, the definitive decline of one of the greatest in the history of motor racing? Leave it in the comments.